Welcome to the 90th birthday celebration of MGW. Um, as I said a couple minutes ago, we have a very long program on tap here, so I want everybody to get comfortable in their seats, and just a couple little housekeeping items. Um, the boxes and baskets for cards and anecdotes and written stories and all that kind of stuff are up at the front door. If you missed them when you came in, Julian and Sienna may not have pointed those out to you because they weren't there. So if you've got something to put into the boxes and baskets there, go ahead and do that. Gifts, cards, cash, whatever. I just wanted to start off. The first thing I wanted to do here is to give a toast to my wife, who did an amazing job of putting this day together. Having to put up with caterers and Bevmo and my dad, amongst others. And as you all can see, she did an absolutely fantastic job, and she can relax now. She's pretty good at this. She's done a wedding, and she's so if you want to, she's got a card if you want to do some event planning. So we're here to celebrate Mel, and we're going to hear a lot about Mil's past today, and maybe more than you want to hear. But you got to talk to him about that. I've got no control over it. So I just wanted to mention, briefly before we get going here about the kind of the present and how Mill is, the most up-to-date 90-year-old. Certainly I know, and in my practice, I know a fair number of 90-year-olds, but probably that most of you know as well. Besides spending, hours on CNN every day, mostly trying to gird his anti-Trump arguments. He's also on the computer doing all kinds of stuff. He's on Facebook. He took Uber to a USC game. He'll never do that again. But he is on top of things. And just one additional example of that. Many of you are probably aware that about a month ago he had a car accident, little auto accident, driving around here, and some 20-something whippersnapper from Iowa ran into him, and he, his car was totaled, and he had some injuries here and there, but he's healed well, as you all can see. But what some of you don't know is that when he was on his way to an appointment that day and he got in the car accident, it was for a mani-pedi. So if this isn't a 2018 guy, I don't know what is. I think that's very impressive. So we're gonna go through some toasts here, and we're going to go oldest to youngest in terms of sons, firstborn to lastborn. So, going to start off with Mark. Mark is today is Mark's birthday. So Mark suffers from the same problem that I have, which is that my birthday is 2 days away from my mom, Ray's, and his birthday is 2 days away from Mill's. So we get short shrift on the birthdays pretty much every year, and this year is certainly no exception. So any of you that want to say happy birthday to Mark, just give him the word there. Yeah. All right. Maybe later. Maybe later. Maybe later. No. We don't have time for that. Stop. Okay. Good job. And maybe Mill will re-give some of his presents to Mark. So start off with Mark.
So Mike was saying how he's trying to keep everything brief, and those were just his introductory remarks. They're going to be like longer than my speech. So there's been a 2-month negotiation between Mike and Mill about the length of Mill's speech. So just get ready. I want to echo what he said about Kathy putting this together. She's did an amazing job in very little time, totally by herself, and we all the family appreciated it, and I'm sure all of you do. The other person I want to make sure that we acknowledge is Marty, who has done so much for Ray and Mill over the last few months, has made the quality of their lives so much better, and so we should all acknowledge her. She's sitting right next to Mill. So as I said, you're going to get, Mill's perspective on various things in his life that will hopefully not put all of you to sleep, but my perspective as his son, I will be brief about. My early memories are just being the son of a doctor in this house and in our house down in South Shores. It was a normal experience for me, but I don't know if it's normal for other kids. We always had we always knew that our father was doing something very important, and I think it inspired Mike to go into medicine. Maybe it scared me away from medicine, and now I feel like working in the entertainment business is somewhat frivolous compared to what Mill and Mike do, but there were certain events during our childhood that stood out in my mind. One was the phone call from the exchange during dinner. That was an event that would happen once a week or so, and we would all be sitting down having dinner, and there had to be absolute silence. A pin could drop when the phone call came in from the exchange, and Mill had to take it, and there were a few times when it wasn't like that. Mainly it was, I think, Matt was the problem, and Mill's reaction to that was classic and extreme in those situations, which I don't think a lot of people have an appreciation for. The other thing was the fact that Mill basically would come home for dinner with us and then go back to the hospital. And maybe that's a normal thing for all you doctors in the audience, but now it's a bizarre thing for me to think of that somebody would come home for work and have dinner with his family and then go back to the hospital. And of course, being on call during the weekends affected all of our lives in terms of him not being available, but the accomplishments that he achieved in his professional life, which I'm sure Mike will be able to speak more specifically about, made that worthwhile. as far as from on a personal level with Mill, the support that he gave all of us as sons, and the confidence is something that I will never forget. He was always positive, always telling us that we could achieve whatever we wanted to do, and that there were no limitations on that, and that that kind of positivity and support started in grade school and went all the way through college, and even after, in my initial professional life. So that kind of parental support, I think, morphed in later life, over especially the last few years, into an incredible amount of patience and caring when it comes to Ray. Having observed him over the last 3 or 4 years, in this kind of context, which was very much different. I mean, Ray Cage cared for him a lot in the earlier time period. It's been a revelation, and it's something that I have admired in a great way. So I professionally, as I said, professionally, Mike knows a lot more about the details of what Mill has achieved in that realm than I do, and he'll speak to that. But just in terms of parenting and the kind of positive and supportive nature of Mill as a parent, none of us could have had a better life in that regard. And I hope, I have a 23 and 21-year-old sons now, Jack and Charlie, that they will remember me in the same way that I remember Mill. So here's to you.
This step is going to definitely kill somebody. Come on up here. We need some spotters. That was long. What are you talking about? That was way too long. So, Max, where's Max? Can you come up here? So my dad and I have a special relationship. I think I just want you to undo this for me in a second. You can.
Oh, sure.
You have to come up here. You look better than I do, but. So we've had a unique bond that I think really hasn't been shared by Mark and Matt, with some kind of special skill sets and abilities that they don't have. And of course, I'm talking about our athletic prowess. So many of you know that, and if you don't know, you will hear about it, I guarantee you, that Mill played offense and defense on his high school football team, and was a guard on the high school basketball team, and many other accomplishments athletically. I'm not going to spend time here talking about my accomplishments because we don't have enough time for that. But unfortunately, both of our athletic careers got waylaid by medical school. And our relationship in medicine, as Mark was alluding to, has really been a very special one, and obviously a great one for me, to be to have Mill as a role model for me in medicine and cardiology in particular. And I think he has enjoyed it as well. Obviously, having me involved in the profession that he has loved for many years, and specifically within cardiology itself. I certainly remember in medical school when he would come and visit and spend time with me, that some of my friends, one of whom is here today, Eric Johnson, and Dan Diver, and a couple others I can think of, were somewhat envious of our relationship, just because we had, we were able to talk about things and have a very close relationship within medicine, but also as father and son. So that for me is a very, very special thing. And it's something that has continued over the years. I mean, obviously I've been back here for a number of years now and have been in practice for a long time. We have been able to still do a lot of things together, and not just talking about medicine, but also writing a couple articles together, one of which got published, I don't know, 10 plus years ago with Dave Canham on the paper too. Dave's here. But one of which just Mill and I did together, and actually Mill did the whole thing. I just edited. I just did a little editing here and there, which I tried to do with his speech today, but he wouldn't let me. So Max, can you just open this? Max did the work on this, so I'll let him take credit for the prop part of my talk here, because I can't do a toast without a prop. And this is actually the publication that is going to be published in August in the American Journal of Cardiology, that Mill and I, to a lesser extent, did. So it's called "The Evolution of the Treatment of Acute Myocardial Infarction: A Eulogy to the Coronary Care Unit," and it's a great article. For any of you who are interested in reading it, not many of you will be, except for the physicians here. But it's incredibly well thought out, well written, and that's all because of my dad. So I think that's pretty impressive at the age of 90 to be publishing still as a physician or a non-physician. Much wind there. So he's obviously been a role model for me, not just in medicine, but in life in general. And I think not just for me, but for many people, as we can see by the number of people that are here to celebrate him today. And I think the fact that not just friends of his, but friends of his sons, like Eric and Barry and Alan, have come to celebrate him says a lot. Having traveled fairly considerable distances to come and spend the day with him here on his 90th birthday. So he's a role model, but he's a hard role model to live up to. And I told my kids this a number of times. There's nothing wrong with that. It's okay for things to be hard. I think a lot of times the best things that you achieve in life are things that are hard to attain. And I think trying to pattern oneself after somebody like Mill and his accomplishments is a goal, a great goal for all of us to follow. And Mark was alluding to that some as well. So soon, Mill and Ray will have 2 great-grandchildren before the end of the year. And I have I have no doubt, and I certainly hope that Mill will be trying to teach them how to use their left hand when they're going to the basket, and how to block out on defense. But also, I think more importantly, to live a life of challenging oneself, and to be the best that you can be, and with a social conscience that's directed towards improving the lives of everyone around you. So I think that's a life that he and Ray have been living for almost 90 years. Here's to Mel and Ray. So Matt, I think was very envious of Max's toast, best man toast at Drew and Monica's wedding, and he is going to be in trying to emulate that. I was just saying how envious you were of Max's toast. I was reading your words up here. You shouldn't have left it out. But he's going to do a little. Are you going to do the song first, really?
No, I'm gonna try to do a little talk and then a little song and then a little talk.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, luckily, I think we probably can say that there won't be as many F-bombs in Matt's song as there were. Oh. That was not on there. I didn't even see that.
Well, you just saw the first page.
Sorry,
this is kind of what he did.
I came up with that independently. All right, here's Matt.
Singing just a little bit right now. First, it was your anniversary. Is it on? Here, let me just go here. It was your anniversary yesterday. And how many is it? 66. Is this on? Or I think well, that's probably easier. Well, and Kathy, it's great that you did such a good job this year because you're going to do it again next year at 91, right? Come on, every year now, every year. Why not? Let's see. I am Matt Wyman. I am the youngest son of Mel and Ray. It's not working out that well. Hold on, guys. And for the past number of years, I've made a habit of delivering my toasts on special occasions in the form of song. You find that funny? Okay. Sometimes it can be disastrous, not funny, but I do it. And for the past few months, I've been trying to figure out what song to sing for my dad on this occasion. First, I thought of writing my own. This is where the Max thing comes in that Mike totally ruined, but it was really good. If you'd heard it the first time, just imagine it. But for those of you who attended our last family function, Drew and Monica's wedding, you knew how that turned out, right? Not with apologies to Monica and her family. Max, it was awesome. It was awesome. Maybe too soon, Monica? Too soon? No. But I never can match that one. So next I consulted the ultimate authority on everything, Google. I looked up songs about fathers. And what I discovered was that songs about fathers fell into two categories, both of which did not work for this occasion, albeit for different reasons. The first group, well, these songs, they just sucked. Insipidly over-sentimental. They did not describe my relationship with my father. The next set of songs, like Springsteen's Independence Day, they're great. But the main character in the song, the dad, was either an alcoholic, he was either abusive, or he was not present at all, which probably made for a great singer-songwriter career, but did not describe my relationship with my dad, nor did it describe my dad. So despairing that I'd have no song to sing, I sat down with my pen and began to write what I imagined would be a toast in spoken word. However, as I wrote, while listening to music in the background, a song came on that made me put down my pen and listen. It made me want to pick back up my guitar, and I don't know, something about the words, albeit a bit off color at times, not always directly on point, as you will see, nonetheless seemed to capture the central role my dad played in shaping who I am, and perhaps more importantly, who I aspire to be. Now it says play song. Let's see if I remember to pick. Oops. It's okay, I don't need it. It's hard to do this with just two hands. I need three. Not yet. Not in yet. Again, I need three hands. By the way, Rick Brannon provided the sound. I take him with me wherever I go. He's my sound man. Here, let me move this over here. Throw this mic. Smoke 'em if you got 'em. Drink your glasses to the bottom and toast me on another year. Another year of hope. Another year of holding on. You drinkers by day and you bastards by dawn. And I hope I'll see you soon, and I'll be home come hell or high water, and I know I'll see you soon. Gather round, friends and neighbors who make their living by labor, and share with me this little time we have left to have a drink and catch our breath. Well, it might be what saves our life. Well, it might be just what saves our life. And I hope I'll see you soon, and I'll be home come hell or high water, and I know I'll see you soon. So smoke 'em if you got 'em. Drink your glasses to the bottom and listen to the howling dogs, and how it pleases me to be in such company, and I'm so glad our paths have crossed. I'm so glad our paths have crossed. I'll be home. I'll be and I'll be there for you, and I'll remember you, and I'll be there for you. Okay, so you might be asking yourself, why that song? Glasses to the bottom. Admittedly, not the first thing that comes to mind when you think about what Dr. Wyman might advise you to do. Although I don't know, you're all 90 now, 80 or 85. You might in legalization, who knows? But okay, but probably not on point. Then there is the line, "You drinkers by day, you bastards by dawn." I'm also thinking that that's probably not what Milford would use to describe all of you guys. But then again, in a moment, he might. No, these aspects are probably a bit off mark. No, the real reasons why this song spoke to me are twofold. First, the second verse, "Gather round, friends and neighbors, who make their living by labor, and share with me this little time. This time we have left to have a drink and catch our breath. Well, it might be just what saves our lives." It urges us all to spend more time together, to come together, to have a drink and talk, catch up, find out how everyone's doing, laugh, maybe cry, remember those who could not be here, and celebrate our accomplishments, large and small. My dad's friends always have been a priority in his life. You are all part of our family, and it's important that you're here today to celebrate with my dad. So the first thing I want to do is thank all of you for coming and cheer you for traveling near and far to celebrate with our family this amazing accomplishment, my dad's 90th birthday. I lost my wine glass. Just threw up my back bending down, didn't it? So, well, I'm not done yet. Just hold on. I'm getting to the good part right now. I'm getting to the good part. Damn. Okay, second, the chorus. Is it going a little too far? Too long? No, okay. Second, the chorus. I'm going to keep going. Second, the chorus. I hope I'll see you soon. I'll be home come hell or high water, and I know I'll see you soon. Now, there's a theme here that you've been hearing in all the toasts. It made me think back to a time when I was Julian and Sienna's age, just 10 years old or so. I came home from school one day and faced an earth-shattering dilemma that needed my father's immediate attention. I don't remember what it was about, but I imagine it involved an issue as significant as, can I go play basketball with my buddies, or can I go to the beach next weekend? Something, you know, that was so important, so critical, that an answer from my dad could not wait until dinner time. And so with great trepidation, I called my dad at the office. Trepidation because I knew how busy he was, how the line of patients outside his office, all in the waiting room, into the hallways, outside his office, on the steps, waiting for a chance to see my dad, only to be told in a polite but no doubt firm tone that they weighed too much, drank too much, ate too much red meat, and or did not exercise enough. Something to this day I never quite understood. Why would they wait all that time on those hard steps outside your office only to hear you say all the bad habits that they had? Hold on here. But wait in the hallway on that staircase they did, and I knew my dad likely would have precious little time to deal with me and the concerns that I had and the grievances of a 10-year-old. So I asked him, "Hey, Dad, you got a second?" And his response, "Son, I will always have time for you. What do you need?" It made me feel in that moment that nothing else really mattered. For I was safe, and most importantly, I had a home where all those things existed and were present. That home was not really a physical place. It was a state of mind. It was a place in my heart. That my dad, wherever he was, no matter how busy he was, he would be home, come hell or high water. And although I did not realize it at the time, he also issued forth a challenge to me. A challenge to create that same feeling in my home, that same place of love, that same place of safety for my own children in their hearts, and to do so come hell or high water. So, Dad, here's to you on your 90th. You have always been, always will be there for me, and thank you for pushing me to meet your challenge. Happy birthday, Dad. No, yeah. I could keep going. I could play another song.
Cutting into Mill's time.
I know. I actually saw he looked a little concerned. He was like, "Okay, it's good, it's nice, but get off, man." You off? You off?
We've got a very strict time limit. Dad, you got like 3 minutes now. Is that okay?
Well, he told me to go a little long to catch you short.
So that was great toast. Really beautiful song, man. That's like the nicest singing I've ever heard you do. Seriously. But I don't know, where does the southern accent come from when you're talking? Is that just like an entertainer thing that I don't know about? Like you have to get into the okay. Try to call. So now we're to the star of the show. Milford needs no introduction, except I just had to say, because nobody said it yet, so I had to say this is not the drugstore crowd. This is not the grade school crowd. This is not the pool hall crowd. And if you guys don't know what those references mean, I'm sure he'll tell you sometime during his talk or later on. Dad?
It's an incredible thrill just to stand here. It's an incredible thrill. An incredible thrill to see all of you here. And this dates back in San Pedro to the only doctor here who has been here longer than I. And that's Carl Hill. Carl came here somewhere around 57 or 56. I don't think he can remember when. I came in 59. One of the reasons it's so enjoyable for me to talk to all of you is that my whole life really started back around 70, I think I've got the number right, 76 years ago. It started with the first date I had. I was 14 and Ray was 12. And it was a hayride in this little town in southern Illinois, DuQuoin, Illinois. Now that's spelled D-U-Q-U-O-I-N. And that comes from an Indian chief, Chief DuQuoin, and he got the name from a French explorer. But there was nothing about DuQuoin that had all that magic of its name. DuQuoin was in southern Illinois. Southern Illinois was more backward even than parts of Kentucky. We were further south than parts of Kentucky. The prejudice in southern Illinois was incredible. Although our town didn't have this rule, towns within 10 or 15 miles did, and that was if a black man was seen after sundown in southern Illinois, he would be put in jail. Now, maybe the only thing that was just as bad, no, it couldn't have been just as bad, but bad, was also the anti-Semitism in southern Illinois. There were only 7 Jewish families. And so through my whole life in high school, everything that I was doing frequently was met with some derogatory remark. Despite that, though, Mike was right that I had a wonderful left-handed hook shot. No one knew how to shoot both with their left and right hands at that time. The other interesting thing was that I was a hell of a football player. I did play both offense and defense. And I only weighed in my junior year 132 pounds. The other linemen, now these were sons of bituminous coal workers, they were over 200 pounds or 220 in high school. But I was a lot faster than they. And I didn't get hurt a great deal. Blocked a kick with my face once. Turned my ankle badly. A few hits and things of that sort. But I was sure that when I went to Northwestern, when I got up to 150, that I could actually go out for football at Northwestern. And it definitely could be said that the reason that I'm a fairly good cardiologist today is because the coach of Northwestern actually preserved some of my brains. And the way that happened was, on every play in scrimmage when we were warming up in the summer, I was getting killed by these 220-pound guys who were much faster than me. And finally, Pappy Waldorf came up to me, put his arm around me, the name was perfect, and said, "Young man, what do you want to do in life?" And I said, "I want to be a doctor." And he said, "Well, let's take these shoulder pads off before you get killed." So there's no question that Pappy saved some of my brains. But Ray and I grew up literally together. She was not only my first girlfriend, she was my only girlfriend. We went together in high school. That's what they called it then, girlfriend and going together. And we went together through college and through my first 3 years in medical school. And then in 1952, we got married. But my time at Northwestern was not that pleasant. The whole important thing was to make high grades. And I had a tremendous amount of competition at Northwestern because of the great high schools around Chicago. the great high school New Trier outside of Chicago had about 25 PhDs in their class. When my chemistry teacher introduced us in our first class, he said, "Now we're going to have to learn this together." And after the first 2 weeks, we had all passed him up. But Ray, on the other hand, when she went to Northwestern, she had a full scholarship. She had a scholarship because she won the national tournament in dramatics in high school. That was called the National Forensic League. And Ray was in all of the plays at Northwestern. And Ray did summer stock at Eaglesmere, Pennsylvania, in the resort town at that time. She was also did television shows, national television shows out of Chicago, and also worked in the small theaters throughout Chicago. There was no question that our hometown was sure that she was going to be the next Betty Davis or the Katharine Hepburn or whatever. But she made the mistake of marrying me at 52. Northwestern was a tremendous disappointment to me because I made outstanding grades at Northwestern. I made straight A's in organic chemistry and comparative anatomy. Those were the two courses that got you into medical school at that time. But the fact was that all of my white Protestant friends got into Northwestern with grades much lower than I, and I was rejected. Never forgot that. In 1952, when I was at Illinois, I felt that this quota system was horrible, and the fact is that we only had at Illinois at that time no problem as far as Jews getting in to Illinois, but there were only 7 women and only 2 Afro-Americans. And so I started a group called AIMS, which was the Association of Interns and Medical Students. And our only goal was to have more women and more blacks in medical school. But here's the punchline. I was investigated by the House Un-American Activities because, in fact, I was promoting some communist problem. That was the time of Joe McCarthy that some of you people remember. And to indicate what an interesting story and how things keep changing, back then in 1968, I was a charter member of the Physicians for Social Responsibility, and our organization was awarded the Nobel Prize for nuclear disarmament. So all the way from being examined by the House Un-American Activities Committee to getting the Nobel Prize. Not that I got it, but it was our group. My whole training period was fascinating at the University of Southern California. Our publicity hasn't been too good this time at the University of Southern California. But the fact is, my first intern was Sam Wirtschafter, who is here today. And Sam was clearly the best intern I ever had, and I indicated then, this is back in 1957, for Sam to join me when I came out in practice. And so I came here in 59, and Sam joined me in 1961. And the other incredible friend who's here today, he and his wife, is Julian Haywood. Julian was a cardiac fellow at the same time I was. We've continued this close friendship all these years. Julian is a professor emeritus at USC. And in fact, the coronary care unit at USC at the county hospital is the Julian Haywood coronary care unit. And there is also a lectureship, the Julian Haywood lectureship, given every year at USC. When I decided to go out and practice, it was going to be something different than where I had all of this really, if you will, pull, if you wish to call it that. And that was my brother and sister-in-law in the west end of town. My sister-in-law, at 22, was the first young woman, especially Jewish young woman, who had a consulmanship in a very large city in the United States. It's said that she, in fact, wore out 13 shoes walking the entire area to get elected. Rosalind has clearly become the doyen of politics in California and the United States, and this is the way she was described in a New Yorker magazine article. And my brother had a tremendous law practice at the same time. When he died unexpectedly at 48, he had a law practice of over 150 lawyers in the west end of town. My time in San Francisco has been fantastic, and I obviously don't have time, since Mike's going to pull the microphone plug any minute, to go over it all. But one of the things that we did do that was so important at that time was to change the way heart attacks were treated, and this was called the Coronary Care Unit. And our hospital, San Pedro Hospital, was the first hospital in Los Angeles County to start a coronary care unit, and one of the first in California. And since I had written a few papers on it, the first international conference on coronary care units in Washington, D.C. in 1968, I was asked to give the paper on coronary care in community hospitals. In 1965, we started training coronary care nurses. They became, obviously, much better to diagnose complex arrhythmias than any of the doctors in our hospital. They also knew how to judge a patient in terms of early heart failure. They knew how to use the stethoscope. They were actually a doctor in nurse clothing. Our first coronary care nurse director was Lucy Hammersmith, and she was quite remarkable. Lucy was going to be here today, but she broke a hip and could not come. Two of our people in the coronary care unit at that time, that first coronary care unit, was Eileen Atwood and Ginger Wecker, and they're both here today. As Michael said, we did write a great many papers. We wrote over 60 papers that were published in different peer review journals. And so it was a really glorious time. Since I have so many stories that I haven't told you about at all, I think I'd like to invite all of you back 2023. Because at 2023, I'm pretty sure at 95, I'll still be alive. And then if any of you are still here, in 2028, at 100, I'm sure my days will be numbered, but I hope I'll be here then as well. But if you pick up the phone and you call the number that we've given you to find out the time, it may go something like this. I'm so glad you called. This is Mel Wyman. I'm so glad you called, but I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to return your call. A few days ago, I passed away. And when people use that term, passed away, they usually mean they're in heaven or they're in hell. I'm in neither. I'm in some little glass jar at the hillside mortuary beside my brother and my mother and father. But like all of these little recorded events or telephone calls go, it says something like this. Now, I want you to have a great day. But more important than that, I want you to have a great life, because there's no question that Ray and I have had a great life.
So I just. Yeah, that was quite a toast. I just want everybody to notice the fact that Mark and Matt and I all had notes that we were working from. Matt had like a whole score and notes and speaking in southern dialects, and my dad, 90 years old, had 0 notes. Did quite a job. So so the plan now is we are going to serve food and get things going, and we will continue with giving toasts, and pretty much anybody who wants to get up and say a few words. We've got a few people who are specifically going to come up and say some things, but anybody else who wants to come up and say a few words in relation to this day and this celebration, and Mel, feel free, but you have to go through me first. So we'll get going on the food, and everybody keep drinking and eating and celebrating. Thanks. Dodgers are just about to win in the 11th inning. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that's surprising. And she's still the biggest Dodger fan, amongst many other things. So here's Roz.
Well, let's bring the mic down first. Okay. We got volume? We got volume. Well, let's do a little business here first. I want to know, is everybody registered to vote? Okay. Well, I'm happy to tell you how to vote, too, but I'm not sure if we have a full house for the right Ds. So, but it's an odd time, I must tell you. When I was trying to think of what to say about Mill, I came in tonight, and little Julian, I'm big with little Julian because of baseball, and he came up to me, and I got a big hug, and I said, "How are you, Julian?" We talked for a minute, and he said, "How are you? How's your grandfather?" And he said, I finally found out what to say. He said, "I think my grandfather will be drunk." I mean, what could be better? So I'm not sure how I handle that if I was going to go a little further. But when you try to talk about somebody very special, sometimes it's pretty difficult. But I met Ray and Mill 64 years ago. That's a long time ago. And Gene Wyman loved his brother as much as any human being could. And he decided, you know how you come into a family and they're worried about meeting the in-laws? And he decided that the right thing for me to do was to meet Mill and Ray, because that was safe. He figured they would be okay, and that I would enjoy them. So I did meet Mill and Ray, and they were lovely. And my next time with them was fascinating. We were in the kitchen, and I'm sure Mill probably won't remember this, but I wanted a cold drink. And he said, "Well, they're in the refrigerator." And I was standing, I said, "I'll get them." I went to the refrigerator, and you know what I saw? And I kind of went, "Ah!" And you know what it was? There were hearts in bottles floating around in the refrigerator. And I thought, oh my God. And then Mill came and described each one to me. How beautiful they were. And this had something coming out of here, and something else came out of something else. And I thought, this was the one that Gene Wyman wanted me to meet? I mean, was this a mad scientist that I had just left and met? And so, anyway, I got over that, and then he explained to me how important, obviously, these hearts were. He was working on the heart machine, the heart something machine, which he was very big at that point. But then Mill and Ray moved next door to my mom and dad. And I thought, we'll share a lot together. We'll enjoy what they say to each other and talk about. And every time Mill would come and we would be together, and I'd say, what'd you talk? My dad and mother were both pharmacists. And I thought, my father loved to find a doctor who didn't know the new medicine, and he would catch him. And I thought, oh, poor Mill, my dad's gonna catch him on all the medicine that he doesn't know. But then it was really, really funny, because Mill would say, your mother made chicken soup for me. Your mother made gedempta chicken for me. Your mother cooked all the time for me. In my conversation, what's better than somebody who loves your mother? So now I had gotten over the refrigerator, and he loved my mother, and I thought, well, they're okay. I can really handle this. And then I was trying to think of something about being prepared. And Mill would say to me, after I'd spoken, sometimes I'm not prepared. And he would say when I'd get finished, Mill Wyman was always prepared. And as you saw today, prepared again, and Gene Wyman was always prepared. So over the years, when I would speak, Mill would come up and he would say to me, Roz, you didn't have a note. How did you speak extemporaneously? And he said, if Gene was here, you did okay. And I all really appreciated that. And then Milford loves to write letters to the editor. And he would call and he would say to me, do you think this letter is okay? It was perfect. But he says, maybe I should make it even better. And I said, Mill, it can't be any better. And he said, well, let me call you back. So he would call me back. But that letter went. How many of you always say, oh, I want to write a letter to the editor, and you never do it? Mill does it. And those letters are really quite good. So I was trying to say today, there is hard to describe him. He is a doctor who holds the patient's hands. He is a doctor who answers calls. He is a father who cares. He is a brother-in-law who always was there when you called. He is and was so special. No man in this world could be closer, more in love, caring more about his Ray than Mill Wyman. And I just want to say, I love you beyond belief. You are a special human being, as is Ray. And I'm glad Gene said to meet the best of the Wymans, and I met you. Thank you.
This step is going to kill today.
That was fantastic, Russ. That does remind me, my dad wrote a letter to the editor at the Los Angeles Times about Donald Trump. And he was saying that it was purely from a medical, clinical perspective. Nothing political about it, nothing sociological. It was just all a medical perspective, and that clearly he thought he could make the diagnosis that Donald Trump had syphilitic brain disease. And that, because of his multiple dalliances and, well-reported sexual encounters, that he must have developed syphilis, and that's why he was the crazy wacko that he is. And for some reason, the Los Angeles Times did not decide to print that, which is surprising. That's true. So I'm going to have my friend Derek Johnson come up and say a few words. He has to head off to the airport here. Derek, great to have you come down and celebrate Mill's 90th.
I see what you mean about that step. What a great day, and I was saying to someone else that the three boys did a great job, but Mill, you really smoked them, man. That was awesome. That was an awesome talk, and I'm Mike's friend from medical school. We had very similar training. We were both at Johns Hopkins, and then we were house officers on the Osler Medical Service for 3 years, and we were at each other's weddings, so we go way back. And I got to know the Mill and Ray, I think about 1981 when I was in Southern California for a interview trip for a residency and looking at the Southern California schools. And Mill and Ray opened their home to me, and it was just amazing the time that Mill spent with me and Ray. We talked a lot of politics. We talked a ton about medicine. And it was very clear to me just how engaged Mill was and how his enthusiasm was really infectious. And, here I was from Johns Hopkins where, there's quite a few luminaries. And Mike had talked about how excited his dad was about his work. It was clearly the case. And I remember one day in between interviews, he took me to work with him and introduced me to the 2 coronary care unit nurses who are here today, which I think is just fantastic. And we interviewed a patient together, and then, he kind of buttonholed me afterwards and asked me some tough questions. But it was just this amazing experience. And I have to say, I've been doing this for 30 years now as a cardiologist up in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I was inspired to do cardiology after that visit, just by Mill Wyman. And I know he inspired his sons, but to inspire others for a career in medicine and in cardiology, I think is really a special thing. And I've been wanting to say this at an event honoring Mill for many years, and this is the first one I got invited to, and I'm so glad I'm here, Mill. I want to toast you for making my life what it was.
Thanks, Eric. That was great, and I think that's a great segue into Dave Canham. Just going to have Dave come up and say a few words. Where's Dave? There he is. Dave was my dad's partner for a number of years, and is now. What's that? You okay? A tough step. Is now and has been for many years the lead cardiologist at Hospital of Good Samaritan and with LA Cardiology. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Well, I also am honored to be here and to recognize an individual that has come to mean through the last, 40 years, an enormous amount to me and to my family. One of the most important days of my life was when I was invited out to meet with Mill and Ray and the other partner at that time, Bruce Goldreyer, to see if we would put together a very aggressive and unique electrophysiology practice in San Pedro. Electrophysiology means cardiac arrhythmias. which was just being discovered as an entity in and of itself and was important then, but is now probably about half of what we do in clinical cardiology. And I was very impressed with Mill at that time, as I knew of the work he'd been doing here in San Pedro. But I didn't know quite what an extraordinary physician he was until I had the opportunity to spend 5 days a week with him, sometimes 7 days a week, observing how he dealt with patients. Now, there are a lot of good doctors in this world, and there are a lot of good doctors that are here, but I don't think there's anyone as extraordinary a physician as Mill Wyman, in my experience. He taught me everything I know about being a good doctor. It's not enough to have good intelligence and good judgment, but the extra element of taking patients seriously as patients, listening to what they are trying to tell you, to sit with them, as Roz mentioned, on a bed and hold their hand. These are character traits I learned from Mill. And they weren't interrupted in the office, where things were run very professionally, and Mill spent endless time with each patient and had a very, very loyal following in his practice. And then in the hospital, he was the same way, with careful documentation, excellent notes, all the things that made San Pedro such a special place. And at the same time, being able to run a CCU, and he mentioned it and Michael mentioned it, but this CCU at San Pedro became nationally famous because of his background from the CDC, where he learned how to collect data about patients, had identity, some 100 different features about each patient who went through the CCU, and was better than I think, or as good as any academic center in this city or in the country. Now, being exposed to this element of professionalism and deep care was a real lesson for me, because I came from an Eastern Medical School also, one that had hundreds of bright people and who published and did things that took them overseas and so on. But none of them really, I think, gave much of a rip about taking good care of patients. Rounds were fast, rounds were teaching students, and for me to come out and fall under the influence of Mill and our practice, to me, was a life-changing event. And having gone now to another hospital, I've tried my best to think in every situation that comes up, what would Mill have done in this situation? Sometimes there are cases that just don't go well when you're trying to make a diagnosis or in a history and physical situation. And I think I recite to myself the things Mill would have done. He would have taken a great history. He would have done a complete physical. He would have sat and listened to every complaint until the sun came up. Then he would have insisted on getting the right tests done and getting patients the help they needed. It's very time-consuming. The patients appreciate it and are incredibly loyal, because most doctors in this environment don't deal with patients this way. We're stuck with schedules and 15-minute visits and EHR and so on. But Mill taught me that that's not enough, that to do the job right, you've got to take the time and you've got to make sure the patient knows you're on his side. Mill, in my mind, he may have been a 150-pound football player, but he was also one very, very tough individual when it came to getting what patients needed. Every day now we struggle in trying to get the things for our patients that they need, because the insurance companies are reluctant to do the right thing these days. But Mill taught me that the fight's never over until you've won the battle. And these are lessons that I learn every day and learn from you. And I want to thank you for being so influential in my career and giving me some of the things that have helped me do well in other sites. But I give you all the credit in the world for it. You're an exceptional man and an exceptional doctor, and you deserve every bit of praise you've gotten today. Thank you.
If we get through the day without somebody breaking their leg on a step, it's a big plus. We got no orthopedic surgeons though. Cardiologists will be worthless in that situation. I guarantee you. So thank you, Dave. Dave sent me a copy of a tribute to Mel that was just fantastic. It was pretty much everything he said today, but you left out the part about, it was just accolades and, how fantastic it was to learn from Mel. But he said, I wouldn't take it so far as to say that I would wear a brown suit to work. Yeah, it was like complimenting the fact that he wore a tie every day, but I wouldn't go so far as to say I'm going to wear a brown suit to work every. Ginger, where are you? So, Ginger, as you've heard from several people, including my dad, has been was a nurse in the CCU for many, many years, and was one of those people that are cited in this article here. The nurses that were trained to really take the role of doctors in the coronary care unit and perform what was at that time a revolution in ICU and CCU care. So, thanks, Ginger.
It's a little high. I need to grow a couple of inches. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm Ginger Wecker, and Eileen Atwood and I have been kind of talking about this, the kind of stories that we have to tell about our different experiences in San Pedro Coronary Care Unit. As been said several times, the Coronary Care Unit at San Pedro Hospital opened in 1966. As one of the very earliest coronary care units anywhere, really, and certainly in Southern California. They had done extensive training with the nurses starting in 1965. Eileen was one of the first, was included in the coronary care unit, and she stayed working there until she retired. So that's quite a long period of time. During that period of time, there were a great many changes. I came in 1968, early 1968, and was asked to consider going into this very challenging kind of work, which was certainly nothing that nurses. I graduated from nursing school in 1961. At that time, we didn't do CPR the way it's done today. We didn't have respirators. We did not. Nurses did not look at EKGs at all because that was not part of our training. So we had no experience with any of those things at all. And when you walk into a new situation like that, it's really quite a challenge. At that time, the hospital was 135 beds. There were no doctors in the hospital at all unless they were there to make rounds or had been called in specifically. And that included in the emergency room. There was no doctor in the house. So at night or in the evening, the nurse that was on duty in the coronary care unit was alone. And Dr. Wyman's concept was that we needed to be used as a house officer, because when there's an arrhythmia, it needs to be treated immediately. It can't wait to call somebody to come in after 10 or 15 minutes. And so we worked on that premise. And I think that in today's world, nurses and the doctors don't realize how this kind of thing started, because it was extremely revolutionary to have nurses function in that capacity. We took care, we evaluated the patients, as he told you, for physical signs of congestive failure and various other things. But the arrhythmias as well, we followed protocols with standing orders for how to initiate treatment for any and actually all arrhythmias that occurred in the unit when there was no doctor there, which was actually most of the time. And we had standing orders for comfort care for our patients as well, and as well as pain relief, so that our patients were extremely comfortable. As Dr. Cannon pointed out, when we moved into the new unit after it was built in 1971, we had a lot of new responsibilities with drug studies. We assisted, the day nurses assisted in the EP lab, accompanied patients to Los Angeles hospitals when they were going to be having surgery. So there were many different aspects of our care that we got to do. But the thing about the coronary care unit that is actually probably the most remarkable aspect of it is how dramatically, in such a few short years, it changed the entire practice of nursing training and nursing education. Because, as I said, the fact that none of these things that we were called to do were ever taught in school, were never expected of the nurses, that was just simply not part of the practice. And nursing education now includes all those aspects of training and education, and we just simply were on the cutting edge of many, many changes in medication. All during those years, all during that time, Dr. Wyman was a constant source of enthusiasm directed to us, encouragement, support. Anytime there were problems, we could come to him, and those problems got solved very, very frequently with a new approach to something. And we would solve all of those issues together, it seemed like. He provided us with many opportunities for expanded study. He provided us with the opportunity to travel across the country to go to heart seminars, drug seminars, et cetera, et cetera. So really, those of us that started early in the unit with our little 3-bed unit that had monitors at each bed and a defibrillator that was way bigger than this machine here, and is certainly completely different from anything that those of you who are in the hospital now will see on a regular basis. We simply were in the golden years of this phase of medicine, and it has just really been a privilege and a pleasure to work with Dr. Wyman, who was so encouraging and so supportive and really provided us with immense opportunities to learn and to expand the practice of nursing. I think that this really was cutting edge medicine. They were golden years.
Thanks, that was a great kind of summary of the things that are discussed in this article. And I think one of the most important aspects of that, at least in terms of today, is how transformational that was. For me, training and practicing medicine from the 1980s onward, it seems just like the normal kind of routine kind of thing. But back in the 1960s and 1970s, for this kind of care to take place in the coronary care unit setting and have the nurses take that kind of responsibility was extremely unusual, if not unheard of. My dad actually said in the article there were many doctors in the hospital who, when the nurses would tell the doctor what kind of arrhythmia they were seeing on the monitor and what to do about it, the doctors would say, "Well, you're a nurse. Like, why would I listen to you about this?" And my dad had to say, "You don't know what you're talking about." He gave them the support and the ability to really take that role and that responsibility, and that was a very unusual, impressive thing. So I was going to have just maybe take a little break from the medical aspect, have Alan come up and say a few words. I wanted to.
Sing a song, Alan. In a country accent.
No song, sorry. And there is actually a medical aspect to this. So Mark and Mike and I went to college together. I want to tell you a story that took place over 3 days about 30 years ago. So this was sometime after we graduated from Pomona, and my mother had just retired. She was 65 years old, and she was living in Santa Rosa. And Mark came up. I forgot what we were doing then. Maybe you'll remember, Mark. But anyway, we were together, staying at my mom's place, and I started to tell him that my mom was not doing well, and she had a hard time with her breath, and she didn't want to walk very far anymore, but she had just seen her cardiologist in Santa Rosa, and he said, I think you're okay. Your heart doesn't sound just quite right, but come back in 6 months. So Mark said to me, you know what? Let's call my dad. And I had always found him kind of an intimidating character, right? I was really young when I first knew him, and I never thought I could, just call him, Dr. Wyman, what do you think? Well, anyway, so Mark got him on the phone, and then I got on the phone, and I described my mother's symptoms to him, and he said, get her on the next plane down here. And so my mother and my sister flew down the next day, and came to his office in San Pedro, and my sister describes the story as this, that Milford listened to her heart and picked up the phone and called an ambulance. And in 15 minutes, my mother was on the way to downtown Los Angeles to have a heart valve replacement surgery. He said her heart was operating at 15% efficiency. I remember that at that time. And she was lucky to have lasted a day. And so what I want to tell you is that was 30 years ago.
A great story.
For us,
That was awesome.
so every Thursday morning at 6 a.m. Is that the time? So this is again a demonstration of how Mill continues to be engaged and is participating. It's not just medicine, right? But it's all kinds of discussion, and Jim may tell you more about that. But Jim is one of the active participants there, and it's going to give us a few thoughts about it.
Well, not thoughts so much about our Thursday morning breakfasts, but about Mill. And I guess a lot of what I will say will mirror what David Canham said. We arrived about the same time, but unlike David, who was arriving as a partner of Mill and a fellow cardiologist, I was arriving as a young psychiatrist. And I didn't have a lot of contact with Mill at first, but it was obvious as soon as I got there that the highest profile, most respected physician in the hospital was Milford Wyman. So, psychiatrists sometimes are accused of doing very little but sitting around observing and thinking about things. And over the years, I thought about it, what was it? What was it? Clinical excellence, of course. Dedication to the patients, obviously. Their love for him couldn't be missed. Really, in those days, another thing I thought about was, we all went through medical school, we learned about medicine, then we trained in public hospitals where patients were run through so we could stick a stethoscope on them or cut them a little bit or whatever we did. If I got to cut them, they were very out of luck. We didn't learn to be doctors until we got out in practice. And then you got to observe other doctors, and you got to see them, and you got to learn from them. And here was the doctor of the hospital. And so I watched, and I thought about it. And then I started to hear these stories about the first CCU. And first CCU, that's amazing, in this small hospital? And I thought, how did he do this? Knowing about the inertia of hospital administrations, the inertia of medical staffs, how in a small community hospital could anybody set up a program where the nurses were going to get to do things that the other doctors really couldn't do? How did you get that done? And I came to realize there was a strength to Milford Wyman that really, really summed it all up. That there were other good doctors, and I hoped to be one of them, and maybe I became one. But I've never met anybody with his strength as a physician. in every aspect, including getting things done for the patients that needed to be done. And we certainly need you in this era. So I'm going to tell just a little story and get off. This is going to sound corny. It may sound silly to some of you, but if you know Mel, it's not corny and it's not silly. That 3-bed CCU that Ginger mentioned, I guess, was it 5 years later, you got bigger space. And, as time went past, that little 3-bed room became part of my psychiatry department, which I found out about only sort of accidentally one day when I was giving a tour, and Bruce's wife Barbara said, "Oh, Jim, did you know that room was Mill's original CCU?" And I said, "No, I didn't know that. It's our outpatient group room." So being a historian, and that's a lot of what we do on Thursday mornings, I said we need to be sure that what Dr. Wyman accomplished here is not forgotten. So together with the rest of the Thursday morning group, Sam Wirtschafter, Dick Ellis, Bill McClure, we got together and we had a plaque made. And I wanted to put it on the wall. And then I had to stand on my head with our hospital administrator, because hospital administrators don't like strong doctors. And I just waited till I got her in a good mood one day, got permission to put this thing up on the wall. And it weighed a lot. But anyway, we got it done, and there it was on the wall. And I always pointed out, I give tours of the psychiatric area, and I say, this is an interesting room. Let me tell you about this room. But the part of the story that's going to sound corny, but is very meaningful to me, is, it says what it says, but the biggest letters, it says, under the direction of Dr. Milford Wyman. And I will walk by that plaque, and I will put my hand on it, right on Mill's name. And people look at me, and they say, what are you doing? And I say, I'm putting my hand on this because I want to feel and I want to get Dr. Wyman's strength as a physician. And you are the best. Thank you.
Okay, that was great, Jim. So we are going to do the cake now, I think, right? It's time for the cake, so why don't we get going and cut that up, and everybody can start partaking. If anybody else wants to say anything, just let me know. But we'll have dessert otherwise.
Yeah,
There's still food at the buffet. We have plates and silver over there.